and let's go ahead and dive in here. Welcome everyone to the NetLoad Forecasting Prize, which is a $600,000 prize seeking probabilistic models that predict future amounts of net load. This webinar is going to be recorded today, and we will be posting a copy of the webinar recording as well as the slides on HeroX. I'm going to show you later exactly where to find those items. But we are so thrilled you're here. I am joined today by Kamal Che from the Solar Energy Technology Office at the U.S. Department of Energy, as well as David Larson from EPRI. Kamal, David, thank you so much for joining us. And my name is Emily Evans. I'm from the National Renewable Energy Lab, and I am proudly the prize administrator for this prize. But before we hop in, let's go ahead and talk about a few housekeeping items. Audio options. You have two different options. You can either call in from your computer or your phone. Often if you're having trouble with the computer, calling in by phone is a good option. We will be taking some live questions at the end of today's presentation. Please use the Q&A box and not the chat to submit these questions. It just helps us to organize them. If you do drop them into the chat, we will also try to get to them, but just know that they might be missed. We will also be following up to all submitted questions, either in the chat or the Q&A following today's presentation with written responses, so you will get an answer to your question no matter what. Let's see here. If you're having any trouble with today's webinar, feel free to chat the webinar host. That's Harrison, who's helping us out. And then just a final reminder that we will be posting a recording of today's presentation on HeroX. For our agenda today, we are planning to cover a background of the NetLoad Forecasting Prize, kind of the who and the what and the why of the prize, a prize overview, kind of take a high level overview of the prize and everything that you need to know. We'll be doing a live HeroX demo. HeroX is our prize platform website that you'll be using to submit your various forms in addition to the Solar Forecast Arbiter. And then David will lead us through some technical details and scoring that you need to be aware of for the prize. And then we'll wrap up with some time to answer any questions that you might have. Real quick, before I hand things over to Kamal, the American Made program is really proud to hold the NetLoad Forecasting Prize. For those of you who might be unfamiliar with the American Made program, it's powered by DOE and administered by NREL to incentivize innovation through prizes, training, teaming, and mentoring. If you'd like to learn more about American Made or join our amazing American Made network, please visit americanmadechallenges.org, and we'll be dropping that link in the chat in just a moment. And without further ado, it's my pleasure to hand things over to Kamal to talk to us about the background of the prize. Kamal, over to you.
All right, can you hear me? All right, thank you all for joining us this afternoon. Thanks, Emily. As Emily mentioned, my name is Kamal Çelik. I'm a technology manager with systems integration. I've been with DOE for 7+ years. Next slide, please. So first, let's talk about at a very high level what the NetLoad Forecasting Prize is. So we are looking for probabilistic models that will forecast the future of the net load day in advance of the forecast. So, and during the prize and competition itself, we will, use those models to get the forecasts. The prize is up to $600,000. We are anticipating 3 winners and 3 runners up. The competition will be for 28 consecutive days. So we will not differentiate for the week of the day. The competitors will load their future forecasts to our Solar Forecast Arbiter platform. Next slide, please. The prize goals at a high level, again, we would like to increase the stakeholder awareness. The stakeholder base is comprised of forecast provider vendors, and then the utilities, independent system operators, other vendors and other stakeholders like planners and people who want to invest in solar generation. We also want to demonstrate the feasibility of fair and high quality evaluations. For that purpose, we will use this publicly available open source platform that I mentioned earlier. And then we want to promote probabilistic forecasting in the industry with some transparent metrics and specifications for probabilistic net load forecasts. Thank you. And we will use, as I mentioned, the Solar Forecast Arbiter, SFA. This is an open source platform. It facilitates data access, evaluation of forecasts, and etc. EPRI will provide the historical net load data for competitors. So there will be some time for the competitors to train their forecasting models. And then EPRI will also provide operational support during this priced timeline. And then we will use, as you can see, the link there, https://forecastarbiterepri.com. I would highly encourage to go and try that environment, the platform, and see if you have any questions prior to the competition. So thank you very much. And back to you, Emily.
Thank you, Kamal, for that overview. All right, and now we're going to dive into some more specifics around the prize and what you need to know if you are interested in signing up. Next slide. All right, so as we've said, this is a $600,000 cash prize for net load forecasting. We are anticipating having 3 winners. The first place winner will get $200,000. Second place winner will get $150,000. Third will get $100,000. And then we anticipate 3 runners up as well that will each receive $50,000 in cash award. For those of you who might be unfamiliar with prizes, we're a bit different than your kind of standard grants or FOAs or SBIR awards, in that the money that you win has no strings attached. There's no milestones, there's no deliverables. That money that you receive, if you are a winner, is yours to do with however you see fit. We hope that you use that money to advance your model and your probabilistic forecasting, but we're never going to come asking for deliverables. That is for the work that you've done and exceeding expectations in the competition. Next slide. So who can compete? The net load forecasting prize is open to both for-profit and nonprofit private entities, non-federal government entities, so like states and local governments, and academic organizations. Important to note, individuals and federal employees are not eligible to apply, although federal employees can participate. They just are not eligible to win any cash prizes. For full eligibility, there's a lot more detail there, especially around that you have to be a US entity or organization, and that can all be found in the official rules document, which is linked here, and I will drop it into the chat in just a moment. Next slide. All right, so let's say you're an eligible entity, you're interested in applying. How do you go about it? So here's the prize process in a nutshell, and you're going to see this a couple different ways throughout our presentation. The first thing you want to do is sign up on HeroX. I've dropped the HeroX link into the chat already, and we're going to be doing a live walkthrough of it. But your first step is to create an account and sign up on HeroX. Your second step is going to be to submit an intent to compete form by March 27th. That submission form can be found on HeroX. Then, after you've signed up and you've submitted an intent to compete, we will be reaching out to you to sign an NDA agreement with EPRI to receive the data. And that will be your next step, is after you sign the NDA, you will receive your forecast data and you can begin training your models. We anticipate that this is going to begin around March 6th. Following you receiving your receiving the data, we'll have a forecast test week using the Solar Forecast Arbiter platform. David's going to talk a lot more about that in just a moment, but you will have a week to essentially test out in real time your models and the Solar Forecast Arbiter to get ready for the competition forecast period, which will be April 30th through May 27th. And then we anticipate to announce winners sometime in July 23rd. Note that we do have some asterisks around those dates. Things do often shift around prizes, but if there are any changes, we will certainly be communicating that. Just a quick note that you must submit your intent to compete and sign the NDA before you can receive your forecast data, that historical data. Again, David's going to be talking more about this in detail, but we strongly encourage you to submit your intent to compete as early as possible so that you have as much time to train your models before the competition forecast period. And just a friendly reminder, I'm seeing a couple questions rolling into the chat, and that's totally fine, but if you can put them into the Q&A, that would help us to keep track, but I will also keep an eye on the chat here as well. All right, so after you sign up in HeroX and create an account, your next step will be to submit an intent to compete submission package. The submission package is due no later than March 27th at 5 p.m., although we do encourage you to complete that as early as possible. Your intent to compete HeroX submission package is going to have 3 items. One is going to be a cover page, one will be a summary PowerPoint slide, and intellectual property licensing agreements if you have them. We'll also ask some basic information about your team, who's your team captain, point of contact, address, kind of basics. Note on the summary PowerPoint slide, that slide is really up to you, what you would like to put in there. It will be public facing after the competition, so any information that you put in there will be publicly available. And it's really up to you on what you want to include there. I would talk about your organization. You can talk about your methodology if you want, but that is really up to you and helping you to promote your own team. And I'm going to walk through how to submit the intent to compete in real time in just a moment. Next slide. All right, and then the winner selection process. So how are we going to select winners? So following the forecast submission period, DOE is going to review the scores and take into consideration program policy factors to make the final winner determination. David's going to talk about this in just a moment, but scores are going to be calculated using a continuous ranked probability score. And this score will evaluate competitors on the accuracy of their forecasts compared against the benchmark. So when you get your score back, a positive scale signifies that your forecast is more accurate than the persistence ensemble forecast. And if it's negative, it means it's less accurate. And then we will be announcing winners in June 2023. Reading the rules is always a great place to start with any prize competition. The net load forecasting rules are available on HeroX. I'm going to show you exactly where to find them. I would strongly encourage you to read these rules. It's the best source of information for all things about the prize, and let you know all of the ins and outs and details. All right, important dates. We launched this prize on February 7th at the Distributech conference, and the next submission deadline is March 27th at 3 p.m. Eastern. So make sure that you submit your intent to compete by 3 p.m. Eastern. We will also be holding a technical webinar for registered competitors. That's going to be a much, much deeper dive into all things Solar Forecast Arbiter platform, what you need to know for your forecast, and let you really ask any kind of big technical questions that you have ahead of the test week to make sure that your team is successful. We'll be sending out an invitation to that to all registered competitors as you register for the prize and submit your intent to compete form. We'll then have that test week that's going to go from April 17th through April 21st. And then the Solar Forecast submission period that's going to happen via the Solar Forecast Arbiter platform website is going to run from April 30th until May 27th. All right. And now, if you will give me a moment, I'm going to go ahead and switch us over to HeroX, and I'll do a live demo. If you'd like to scan this QR code here that's in the bottom right-hand corner, you can go ahead and follow along. Otherwise, the link is in the chat if you prefer to do it on your computer, but I highly encourage you to follow along and get signed up right now as we're talking about it and as you are thinking about it. All right. So hopefully you all can see the HeroX page of the NetLoad Forecasting Prize. The URL here is herox.com/netload forecasting, and that's going to take you to this page. The first thing you want to do is click on the follow button to follow the prize. If you do not already have a HeroX account, it's going to prompt you to create an account. It's really straightforward. You just enter your name, your email, and hit submit, and you'll have an account. Very easy. And then click on the follow button. The follow button is going to make sure that you get all of the prize reminders, updates, notifications. You'll know when anything is posted that you need to know about for the prize. So I would highly encourage you to do that today while you're thinking about it. Once you are following the prize and you want to compete, your next step is going to click on the Solve This Challenge button. So when you click on this button, it's going to take you to the competitor agreement, click Accept, and then you'll have an option to either create your own team, join a team, or compete individually. This is really just a function of HeroX. So if you create your own team or if you join a team, it's going to allow multiple people to edit your intent to submit form within HeroX. Certainly an option if you would like to have that functionality. If not, you can go ahead and compete individually. This does not mean that you are an individual competitor. You can still compete on behalf of your organization and your team. It just means that no one else is going to have access to your HeroX submission form. So I'm going to go ahead and say, no, I want to compete individually. And then you're going to get this banner that says you have successfully completed your registration. And then you'll click on Begin Entry. And noting too that if you sign up as an individual and you want someone else to officially join your team on HeroX and have access to that entry form, you can always do that by clicking this button. But in this case, we're just going to click on Begin Entry. This is going to take you to the intent to compete submission form, which you'll see here. We're going to ask you to fill out some basic information about your team, confirm your eligibility. Again, basic information about your team captain, where are you located, and then we'll have you upload a cover page, a submission summary slide, and any IP licensing agreements if necessary. There's also a few more eligibility questions and a question about who will receive the award should you win. Please note that this has to match exactly the name that's listed on your W-9 for your organization. And then you can hit save and preview. If you have everything filled out, there's also going to be a submit button that appears up here in the top right corner, and you'll be able to submit. You will receive an email confirmation as well as a web confirmation once you have submitted. You can always save and preview your submission and come back later if you'd like to kind of check it out before you submit, but all entries must be in no later than March 27th at 3 p.m. Eastern. All right, some other quick functionality of HeroX. In the middle here, we have what we call tabs. So you have a summary tab that's going to list just some basic summary information about the prize, timeline, which is going to tell you about important deadlines. You can see here that we have this informational webinar as well as the submission deadline. Note that it does change it to local time. So although the deadline is 3 p.m. Eastern, it's showing up as 1 p.m. Mountain because I'm here in Colorado. You can also see previous updates, message on the form. If you have any questions, we do monitor the form and we are happy to answer any questions that you might have. You can see the teams who have signed up here, the individuals. Good job to everyone who's been signing up. I see this number has gone up, A+. Would encourage anyone else who wants to sign up and begin to follow the prize to do so. Now's a great time. We also have resources here, official prize rules, as well as the FAQ. When we have announced our site location, we will list that here as well. Obviously, that will be posted in March. So this is HeroX in a nutshell. This is where you're going to get signed up for the prize. This is where we are going to host all the prize information. But the actual competition itself will take place on the Solar Forecast Arbiter platform. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we're going to go back over to the PowerPoint. Harrison, if you don't mind pulling that up. All right, and now it's my pleasure to introduce David Larson from EPRI, who's going to walk us through some of that high-level technical detail about the prize. David, over to you.
Great, thanks, Emily. So I'm going to provide some details today about some kind of key points. We will be providing more information about this. It's available in the rules, but also we'll be having a technical webcast that Emily mentioned later on that will really focus in on just the technical details. So if we go to the next, perfect. So as mentioned before, we're using the Solar Forecast Arbiter. So this is going to be the way that everyone submits their forecast data and how the forecast will be evaluated. This is an existing tool. The most recent change is it went from being originally hosted by the University of Arizona to being hosted and managed by EPRI. But the idea here is we're all using the same tool. This is how we'll be, competitors will be submitting data, and this is how things will be evaluated. If we go to the next slide, this competition is based around probabilistic forecasting. And this information is in the rules, and we'll be discussing this more in the technical webinar, but we needed to make a decision on what are the requirements of these forecasts. So these are day ahead forecasts. And by day ahead, we're using that term kind of like how ISO and RTO energy markets use day ahead, in that every day you submit a forecast for the following day from midnight to midnight. So there's details in here to just be explicit, but the idea is every day of the competition, you'll submit your predictions for the following day. So on Monday, you submit your predictions for Tuesday. On Tuesday, you submit your predictions for Wednesday, etc. There's some details in here about how the probabilistic forecasts are defined, but the idea is that you're going to be submitting what your model is predicting for specific percentiles. The key thing that should be reiterated for everyone here, in case you haven't done something like this before in an operational sense, is this schedule means that if you submit late, your forecasts don't go in. And that's just the requirements of any operations. Forecasts have to be issued by a certain time, and you cannot be late. So in this case, it's 10 a.m. local time, which means if you try to submit at 10:01, you'll get an error and your forecasts will not be evaluated for that date. So just something to keep in mind that this is reflecting operational reality, and that's why it's all set up, but that's done on the arbiter side. So it's up to you as competitors to submit. You could submit it, 1 second before the deadline. You could submit it an hour before the deadline. But just there is that deadline of every day you have to submit by a certain time. And as I mentioned, we'll be answering more questions in detail about this in the technical webinar, but a lot of this is fairly standard, even if some of the language is different. But this is also reiterated in the rules. So moving on to the next slide, in terms of data and test week. So we're anticipating that competitors will have access and be evaluated on 4 to 6 substations across the country. This is going to be a diverse set of locations that represent substations with high solar penetration, but also varying types of climates and also just profiles in terms of net load. So those will be provided later. The idea is that everyone would have access to training data from each of those locations, which you as a competitor, it's up to you how you use those models. But if you're using, for example, machine learning model, you might use that as your training set. The key thing is, because this data is originally coming from a utility or multiple utilities, there's a requirement to have a non-disclosure agreement. And that's actually why some of the eligibility requirements are the way they are, because that's just a requirement of how these NDAs are structured. So as Emily mentioned, you sign up. Before you get the data, the step will be you need to sign the NDA. And then once you have that, that's when you get access to the data. So just something to keep in mind. And if you're an engineer at your organization, that you will be needing to interact with your legal counsel to review these and sign them. So if we go to the next slide, so throughout the competition, each participant is going to be anonymized, which means that you'll be given a name that's not associated with your organization's name. And then that means that you'll be able to see how you're doing in terms of ranking. So you'll know where you rank to everyone else. You won't know their identity and they won't know yours. But you'll be able to see how you're doing at every location and overall. Are you in the top? Is maybe for one location you're doing a little bit worse? And this will be updated on a semi-regular basis, which means during the competition, you'll get to see how you're performing over time, and potentially you could use that information to adjust your models. But that is entirely your choice. We're simply providing here's the evaluation results, and you can do with that what you wish. So at the end, the winners will be revealed, but everyone else will not be revealed. So only the winners. So if in that example there, if the winning team with the anonymous name Prompt Molly was actually company XYZ, it would say the winner is company XYZ, but anything else would not be revealed. Which means for competitors, this is also a way to see how you're doing relative to everyone else, in case maybe you're considering offering or already offer your forecast as a commercial product. So the last thing I'll mention here is about how we're evaluating the metrics. So these are probabilistic forecasts, and we're using the CRPS metric, which if you're not familiar with that, you can kind of think of it as a mean absolute error, but for probabilistic forecasts. The idea is that the CRPS itself measures how accurate you are in terms of a probabilistic viewpoint. But what we're doing is everyone's CRPS value for their forecasts, which will be calculated from their forecast versus the measurements, that will be compared against a baseline. And that's a way to give a sense for the baseline is meant there to say everyone should be beating this baseline, and then how much is everyone improving upon. So it gives a little bit more context to the results rather than just saying some number. You're getting a sense of, oh, I'm 10% better or 20% better than the baseline. And we'll be going through more details on this in the technical webinar. A lot of this information is already on the Arbiter, and we'll be answering questions on these details. But for you as a competitor, you submit your forecasts. We'll return back to say, what is your accuracy in terms of this metric? And then from there, we'll be evaluating all the competitors. So whoever has, for the skill score, whoever has the highest value, they're making the most improvement over the reference forecasts, those will be ranked the highest. But we'll get into more of these details in the technical webinar, though we can answer some questions today. And I believe with that, it's back to you, Emily, to finish us off.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, David. Really appreciate it. All right. So before we transition over into the Q&A, just a couple action items for anyone who's out in the audience who might be interested in competing. Your first step is to follow the challenge on HeroX. The link is here. It's also up in the chat if you scroll up just a little bit. Your second is to read the rules. The official rules are posted on HeroX underneath the resources tab. Take a look, very important. And then submit your intent to compete by March 27th at 3 p.m. Eastern. Very important to submit that, and I would encourage you to submit that as soon as possible. After you submit the NDA, or after you submit your intent to compete, you're going to need to sign the NDA, and you can't get access to the historical data before you sign the NDA and it's been accepted. So the sooner that you submit your intent to compete, the better. It's a pretty easy and quick submission form, and appreciate you doing that early. If you have any questions, email solar.prize@nrl.gov and we'll be happy to answer. And then, but we can take your live questions right now. Thank you to everyone who's already submitted a question. If you have a question that you'd like us to answer, go ahead and drop that into the Q&A. I've seen a couple questions come through in the chat and I have recorded those, but you can drop them into the Q&A. That'd be a huge help. And the QR code here also goes to the HeroX website if you want to get signed up for the competition. But with that, let's go ahead and dive in. And David, we've got lots of questions that I think you'll be able to answer.
Happy to.
The first one is, which substations will be forecasted? And I know we haven't announced locations, but maybe you can provide some additional details there.
Yeah, so we'll be providing specifics on this. You'll know the rough locations of them soon, but the idea is they're US locations and they're across the US, so that it's not just here are 3 substations next to each other in California. The idea is that you'd have something, let's say in the Northeast and something in the Southeast, but it would just be one substation per region. And we'll give information about those soon, which will also be clarified in the technical webinar.
Wonderful. Thank you, David. And then what is the definition of the 0th to an 100th percentile? I'm sure I didn't get that right.
No, yeah, that's so the way we're doing it effectively for folks, you can think of it just as a minimum maximum. But there's different reasons for it, but effectively it's just you're saying there's a 0% probability that the net load would go below this amount. That's up to you to decide on how your model is evaluated, if 0% is 0 megawatts, or if you're trying to do based on historical, but these are just to find out. And same with 100%, it's the maximum. So yeah, in theory, the maximum could be infinite, but in reality, that's your choice to say, I don't think anything's gonna be above this amount.
Perfect, thank you. We received a couple questions and I can go ahead and take this one about eligibility and public versus private company, as well as individuals to participate. And just to clarify, public companies, as long as they're not federal companies, are absolutely eligible to apply. And apologies if that was not clear, but you can be a for-profit, nonprofit, private or public company and still participate. And that can be any type of company, LLC, S Corp, C Corp, whatever makes the most sense there. But you cannot be a federal employee and still win an award. If you are a federal employee and you want to participate just to see where your forecast model stacks up, you're welcome to do so, but just know that you won't be eligible for an award. And you cannot be an individual for the reasons that David mentioned that have to do with the NDA and how the NDA is structured. So you really do need to be an organization for that, either public, private, academic. You just need to be able to fill out that EIN number. All right, moving on. We have a question, and I can take this one as well. After the winner is announced, can we change our publicly viewable information? And the answer is no. You can only change your publicly viewable information up until that intent to compete submission deadline, which is March 27th. So make sure anything that you put in there, you are comfortable with making public. We can make some exceptions here and there. You can reach out to us at solar.prize@nrel.gov if you have a specific case or other circumstances that you want us to consider. But you won't be able to change anything in your submission past March 27th. David, another question for you potentially is, do we have to hand in forecasts every day during the forecast period?
Correct, yes. So every day you'll be submitting your forecast for the following day. And again, it's set up like an ISO energy market where in the morning of Monday, you submit forecasts for Tuesday. And then the morning of Tuesday, you submit forecasts for Wednesday. So that means you're not just submitting 24 hours ahead, it's the next day, midnight to midnight. So midnight, 1 a.m., etc. Perfect.
And I think you covered this, but we received a question on the exact probabilities that you want competitors to forecast? Is it the specific percentiles?
Yeah, so the percentiles, and those are listed in the rules, the exact ones, and those are the only ones that will be evaluated for forecast accuracy. So you'll need to submit for all of those. So when you submit a forecast for Tuesday, it has to be, here's the value I predict for 0 percentile, 10%, 20%, etc.
Perfect, thank you. Another question, is the training data available only after the intent to compete submission package has been successfully submitted? And the answer to that is yes, and also the NDA must be signed and approved. So two-step process there. Again, really important to get that intent to compete in as early as possible.
Yeah, and also if it's not obvious to everyone, if you haven't worked with this type of data before, getting this type of utility data is pretty rare, and that's why we need the NDA. It is really valuable for research in general, so we're very happy to have it, but that's really what's driving a lot of this. It's not just public weather data, it's coming from utility infrastructure, and there are a lot of security requirements around that, which is why you don't get the data until you sign the NDA, and why the NDA has certain restrictions.
All right, wonderful. And then another question, and David, maybe you can answer this, is when will the data set be released?
So it will be once you sign the NDA, that's around the time you'll get access to the data. So you sign up to be in the competition. If you're eligible, then the next step is doing the NDA process. As a result of the NDA, that's when you get access to everything.
Perfect, thank you. All right. Another question, can we do multiple submissions per day with the most recent one taking priority? So for example, in the real world, they'd be submitting at least one every hour to clients.
So you have to submit the entirety of the next day by that time. But if you were to submit one forecast at 8 a.m. and then you say, I've got some new info at 9 a.m., I'm going to update my forecast, that most recent set of values you submit, that's what will be used. And so that happens automatically. So if for some people it might be, we're not sure if we're going to get this new forecast done in time. So we're going to submit one that we know for sure works, and then we'll submit another one if the data comes in. That is totally the competitor. All we see and all we evaluate is say, what is the most recent forecast values I've gotten, and did they come in by the deadline? And if they did, that's what we evaluate.
Great, thank you. Along the same lines of the data that we're providing, are we providing historic future weather forecast data to go alongside the historic net load data?
We're not guaranteeing anything. The arbiter will have some reference data, but the only thing that every competitor will get access to for sure is that historical training data of the net load. And then during the competition, as we evaluate the forecast against measurements of net load, you'll see those afterwards, which means that you could potentially use more recent measurements of net load as input to your model, but that is your choice.
Great, thank you. What about introducing external data sets? Are competitors allowed to pull in?
Yes, competitors, there's no restriction on what data you use. The way we're setting everything up is everyone gets that net load data. If you want to use other data sources, that is your choice. But the forecasts are submitted live, which means it's not possible to use future data to sort of improve your model. You have to say, at 10 a.m., this is all the data I have. So it's from 10 a.m. or earlier. But if you want to go out and use different sources, or you have your own proprietary sources of data, that is your choice. All we see is here's the output of your forecast model that you've sent to us.
Great, thank you, David. Next question is, what is the range of the solar penetration levels in the anticipated substations? Yeah, start there.
So when we provide info on the substations, their location, will also be providing info on their solar penetration. And you'll also be getting not measurements of the actual solar generation, but you'll have information on the amount of installed solar with that substation over time. And that will be a monthly value. So you'll know in January, let's say there was 1.1 megawatts, and then now in February, another 100 kilowatts got installed. So you'll have that info. But that's actually part of the challenge of these setups, is that measurement data of the solar part is very rare. So you'll just have at least an info of the penetration and how it changes over time.
Great.
Oh, but
Oh yeah,
I should say generally, and as we've put in the rules, these are meant to be high solar penetration in terms of what's actually on the grid in the US. We have some that are very high in general, and we have some that are high for the region.
good detail. Thank you. Let's see here. We did receive another question around pulling in other data sets like public domain observational data from neighboring sites. In my mind, that's the same, totally fine to pull that in.
Yep. Yeah, that's your choice if you want to use that. There are many great public data sets from NOAA and others that you could use, but we're not putting any restriction. Same with methods. Whatever you want to use, all we care about is how accurate are these in a realistic test.
Perfect. And another one that we've talked about a little bit and about the timing. Can you confirm kind of, again, just for the audience, the timing of the prizes or not the prizes, but the forecast and when you have to submit?
Yes. So for each location, so let's say there's a location in California. By 10 a.m. Pacific time, because that would be local time, you need to have provided a forecast for the following day. So let's say it's Monday. By Monday at 10 a.m. for the California site, you have to have given your forecast that would apply to Tuesday. So the forecast is Tuesday at midnight, Tuesday at 1 a.m., etc. Then on Tuesday, you do the same thing, but now on Tuesday, your forecast is for Wednesday. And if there is another location somewhere else, or the other location would be the same thing for local time. So in the morning, you're submitting forecasts for the following day. So every day you make one submission, but it's the following day, and you just do that over and over. And again, this is matching what happens in utility operations today. So we're not just making this up. This is reflecting the reality and therefore a good test of the forecasts.
Great. A question that I can answer is, where will these slides and the presentation be posted after the webinar? And we'll be posting both a recording as well as the copy of the slides and eventually written answers to all of the great questions that we're receiving here today on HeroX.com under the resources tab. We'll also be sending out HeroX updates when these are available, as well as emails to everyone who has registered here today. So we'll definitely make sure that you have access to that information, but it will be posted on HeroX. Another friendly plug to go ahead and follow the prize so that you get notified as soon as these resources are posted. All right, going back to the data, David, do you have any details you can share around what types of measurements are available in the data, like temperature, pressure, solar irradiance, load?
So in terms of hourly measurements or time series, it is going to be the net load. It is going to be anonymized net load, so it's given as a percentage of a peak, which you won't know. But by default, everyone gets, here are measurements of net load. Besides that, we're not guaranteeing anything. So it is up to you as a competitor if you want to pull in other data sources. But measurements are, you get net load, you get information about its location and solar penetration, but that is the guaranteed data that everyone gets.
Great. Another question, which I can start off with, and maybe Kamal or David, if you want to jump in here. And we received this question in the chat. and it was, will you share the winner's program or forecasting tool with the whole community for everyone's benefit? And the answer to that is no, we will not be. Your model, your tool, that is proprietary data, which you will not be uploading or sharing with us. We are just asking for the output. We will be sharing the winners, kind of the first, second, third place, as well as the runners up. And that is and to the summary slide and the cover page from HeroX, but that's the extent of the public information that we're sharing. I don't know if either of you wanted to add to that.
No, that covers it. I mean, people are welcome to share information and details about their methods, but they are not required. And when you're submitting forecasts, that just means you're saying, here's what the output of my model is. If that's the most sophisticated AI machine learning thing, great. If it's, I mean, honestly, if it's someone throwing darts at a wall and that's like how they make a forecast and it does well, sure. Hopefully it's not that, but we're not interested in that at this point as a requirement.
Thanks for clarifying. Going back to the data and the timing for the data, someone had a clarification question in the chat and said, so say we submit the forecast for Tuesday on Monday, will we get the original value for Tuesday to submit for the forecast for Wednesday?
So the timing gets a little tricky with the data coming from the utilities and some of their requirements about needing to have a delay on when data is available. So it might be that on Monday you submit for Tuesday your forecast, and it might be that on Wednesday you find out the measurement for Tuesday. So there might be a day or two delay. So that's something to consider. And we're not making guarantees on when that data is available. And also it can vary between the locations. So that's something to consider, just that, yes, you might be able to use the information from Tuesday to adjust your model, but that information isn't ready until Wednesday or Thursday.
Thank you, David. Next question. Do you have any additional information on the type and format of historical data? Maybe you touched on this already, but will the data in the competition be in the same format?
Yes. So because we're using the arbiter, which is very standardized, the way you submit data, the way you pull data, it's all the same. And we'll be covering a lot of that in the technical webinar to show you how to step through. But it is a very standardized way, and we're very careful about a lot of things, particularly timestamps, because if you work with time series data at all, you know, timestamps can be a pain. So we've gone through a lot of effort to try to avoid issues that come up.
Thank you. Next question. You mentioned earlier that public access to the Arbiter dashboard is not available at this time. The question is, can we get private access to it? But maybe we could also talk about the process about how competitors are going to get access to it via the competition.
Yeah, so some of that, there's different things, but in terms of the competition, what matters is you sign up and you're eligible. And the plan is, what's probably easier for everyone is that you sign the NDA, and that's also the same time we give you access to the platform as well as the data. We've been discussing a little bit to maybe give folks access to the platform beforehand, but before they have data. But in general, it's just cleaner if we go, here's access to the platform, and also you already have access to the data because you've signed the NDA, and then you can start testing things. But yeah, that's some of it, because the arbiter is a thing within EPRI now, and there's a lot of different things going on with the arbiter aside from this competition. So sometimes if there's questions that are sent to us, if we don't have context, we give a certain answer, versus if we know it's for the competition, there's a slightly different answer.
Great. I can take this next question, which is, if a competitor submits an intent to compete form stating a specific model, and later after getting access to the data, they find a better performing model that they'd like to use, are they allowed to change the model? And the answer to that is yes, absolutely. You can change your model right up until the competition, throughout the competition. We don't really ask for that. You might want to talk about it in your summary slide or in your description when you sign up with your intent to compete, but certainly not a requirement.
And you could also, it means you could be somewhat generic about how you describe your method. If you say this is a data-driven method using machine learning, that might be sufficient, because we're interested in that info, but it doesn't change how you're evaluated.
Yep. And another question along the lines of sharing the model tool itself is if they will be required to share and provide those details of the modeling technique before or after the competition. And the answer is no, we're just interested in the outputs.
Yep. And in the previous competition, when the winners are announced, the winners were invited to talk a bit about their methods. And that can be good because you maybe want to showcase the types of things you do, but you're not evaluated based on those, and so no requirement.
Great. With the data that we're going to be providing, will we provide the solar power and load separately, or is that all going to be kind of combined?
It is going to be an aggregated, so it's just purely the net load, which if you're not as familiar with that, or just to clarify, by net load, we mean what is the amount of energy demand on that substation after part of that energy demand has already been met by things like behind the meter solar. So rooftop solar, things like that. So it's just what is the net amount of energy people still need to pull from the grid, which is why you get things like the duck-shaped curve on load profiles that you see a lot in certain regions.
And how long is the utility data set?
So it's going to be at least a year from each utility. So an 8760 time series. There's potential that one or more locations might be longer than a year of data. But we're aiming for every location, everyone will get at least a year of historical data to train on.
Great, thank you for clarifying that. Can you talk more about why we're evaluating the percentiles in 10% increments versus, like 95, 97, 99, and what the rationale is?
Yeah, so the general thing is kind of a balance between having enough percentiles that we feel you're capturing the sort of main distribution details, but not asking for so many that it becomes prohibitive for people to submit. So in theory, we could go down to every 0.1 percentile. Whether that really changes things is up to it, but the same with 10% versus 5%. There could be arguments made either way. We feel like 10% is kind of the right balance between what we need for evaluating the accuracy and what is reasonable to ask for all the competitors to submit.
Thank you, David. Let's see here. Oh, talk about what data we're going to receive from EPRI and the Solar Forecast Arbiter to give updates on the status of the substations.
Oh, yeah. So this again, when we have to get NDAs from the utilities, and there's always a back and forth of what they're allowed to provide, and some are more open providing certain things than others. So in the measurement data that you'll get of the net load, everyone will have the measurement data. We're trying to have all of the substations also have at least data quality flags to indicate if there's maintenance or something else happening that would impact the data. But the reality is, with this data and the time sort of schedules you have, there can be things that happen that the competitors won't know. And that would be true of a forecast vendor that would work with a utility, that there might be an outage, or there might be maintenance, or there might be something else that you have to forecast without knowing, which is a challenge, but at the same time, it speaks to this is a very realistic evaluation.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mhm.
This is a really good question, and I'm happy to take this one. By the end of the 28-day period, the winners should be clear. Why do you need an additional month to determine winners? That is such a good question. And the answer is that we still have to get winners approved through the Department of Energy approval chain, which can take some time. We are certainly going to have an eye towards announcing winners as soon as possible, but there's lots of factors that come into play, and we like to give ourselves enough time to get everything approved and announced, but certainly we want to get those winners announced to you all as soon as possible. But thank you for that question. It's a good one.
And also just looking at the previous solar forecast competition, there's also things of, having the announcements across social media. And then there's also last time folks were talking about the competition at an ESIG conference, which is a fairly large renewable energy focused industry conference. So yeah, kind of have to dot your I's and cross your T's and all that.
Yeah, and sometimes we like to announce winners at like a big event, and sometimes we'll wait for a big event to get, more attention on the prize and our winners. And so there's a lot of different things that go into this. I'm seeing that we just have another 3 minutes here, and we're going to have to close things up. We still have a whole bunch of questions. Just noting that if we do not get to your question today, we will be following up with written responses to all these questions. Give us a good week or so to get that turned around. We've received a lot of questions, which is great. But we will make sure to get you those answers as soon as possible. David?
I could speed run through a couple.
Yeah, if you want to speed run, go for it.
Yes.
Oh, David, did you freeze? Oh no.
Yeah, I'm seeing the same thing, Emily.
So how much wind power can we factor in?
Hey, David, just to let you know, you were frozen for the last minute.
Oh, okay. Let me
But you're
turn off
back
my video
now.
to
Yeah.
see if that helps. Okay. I'm coming through okay?
Yep, I can hear you now.
Okay. So wind power, there isn't really any. We'll have more details. These are distribution-sided substations, which also means it's a lot of behind the meter or rooftop solar. Will's question about solar penetration, we'll have those details when we tell you the official, and we'll have numbers to go with that. But we would say this is quite a bit on the net load part of it's the thing where you don't have all the measurements of the solar. We're trying to really focus on that aspect of solar is a big part, but it's really about the impacts of solar. Let's see. I'm trying to think if there's other ones to really quickly hit. Some of these we've already answered in some ways, but
What about, what will the form of the location information be? Will you get like how detailed of like an area? Will we get like a zip code or more detailed?
you'll get a nearest city. That's something that we've kind of gone back and forth with on the utilities about what we can reveal. It will not be a precise GPS coordinate, but it will be close enough that you'll be able to correlate weather and other impacts. You won't have information like a circuit model. You'll just know, this is the, I don't know, a substation in, well, I'm in Palo Alto. So it's in Palo Alto, and you can use that information as you want. It just won't be precise GPS coordinates.
Great. All right, I think we have time for one more question, David, if you see any that you think would be of particular value.
I just see one at the end about the type of generation. So yes, this is solar PV, but a lot of it is things like rooftop or behind the meter solar. But it's solar PV. It's not other types of DERs as the focus. The substations may have those, but what we're really focusing on is substations with a lot of solar PV.
All right. Well, with that, I think it's time for us to wrap up our Q&A. We received lots and lots of great questions. We definitely did not get to everyone's question, but we will be following up with written responses. Harrison, can you go back just one slide real quick? So thank you everyone so much for joining us today. We are so excited you're here, and we are very excited for this exciting prize and competition. If you're out there in the audience today and you are interested in getting involved in this challenge, go to herox.com/netload forecasting, read the rules, and submit your intent to compete as soon as possible so you get access to that NDA and you can start working on that. As soon as possible, but definitely no later than March 27th at 3 p.m. Eastern. And if you have any questions, email solar.prize@nrel.gov. I saw from a couple of people in the questions that they were having trouble with getting responses. I'm going to go ahead and drop my personal work email here into the chat. You are more than welcome to email me directly with any questions if you're not getting a response from the main Solar Prize email. But with that, thank you everyone so much for your time today, and that concludes our presentation. Thank you. Oh, and thank you to David, Kamal, and Harrison for supporting this webinar today.
Yeah, it was great. Looking forward to having everyone participate. And I think also, Emily, as you mentioned, later on, there'll be a technical webinar that will get into a lot of details of the specifics on using the arbiter and submitting forecasts and all of that.
Correct. All right. And we'll be sending out that invitation to all registered competitors following the intent to submit or intent to compete submission deadline. Anyways, that concludes our webinar. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us, and we'll be in touch.